The remnant low of Hurricane Helene continues to meander about in the lower Ohio Valley. It will be making its exit to the east, but there are still a few places in the central Appalachians that are getting some heavy rain and some flash flooding. And the devastation, particularly in western North Carolina and northwestern South Carolina, has been indescribable from what I have seen. So we're going to take a look back at what happened as far as the track is concerned and where we're going in the week ahead, because uh, this remnant low will be getting out of the way. So we'll have it all tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And you can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast by using the referral link or on Amazon. The referral link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's on the description to this podcast. Just go on there, use the search bar, do your shopping, and Amazon will throw us back a little bit of coin. You get your stuff, and it doesn't cost you a penny. So we appreciate your support by shopping our referral link on Amazon. So, Joe, I'm sort of half numb by all of this because a lot now I'm I'm about 20 miles road miles from the North Carolina state line, Murphy, North Carolina, southwestern North Carolina. And this area here where I am in North Georgia, we did get heavy rains, but there was minimal damage, a few trees down here and there, some flooding here and there, but nothing, I've seen much worse since I've been here. But you just jump over the border 30 miles to the north and northeast and head up through western North Carolina. I mean, some of the video and the pictures that I've seen just absolutely blown me away. Two roads that I've driven on quite a bit, I-40 is gone. Interstate 40, gone. Interstate 26, which is a beautiful stretch of interstate that runs through western North Carolina from Asheville into eastern Tennessee, and you wind up at I-81, to the east of Knoxville. I mean, it's a gorgeous ride through the Tennessee mountains. Bridges have been washed away, and they said the road closures there are probably going to be at least 2 years before they get them all repaired. I mean, it just, and then let's just talk about whole towns, whole small towns in the mountains in western North Carolina are gone. I mean, they're just gone.
It's going to be more than just a few days. It'll be weeks, maybe even months for some before their power is restored. And it's just terrible, especially at the time of the year now, because, we're heading into the colder days ahead. And the last thing you need now is to be in a home without power and without heat. It's, and as you just mentioned, I think that the latest count of fatalities, I think 60. So
I saw 89.
89.
89.
Oh, God. And
well, they're not gonna know for a while because there are places that they haven't even been able to get to.
Right.
And you see these aerial shots where these major roadways. I think there's something like 250 major roadways that are closed in western North Carolina. You can't get in or out of Asheville. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing in a way to think about a hurricane having its biggest impacts in the western, far in the interior. I mean, we're talking 200 or 300 miles away from the coast. But this was, we were talking last week, this whole setup from the very beginning in terms of what was going on in the upper air was spelling trouble from the onset. And this hurricane, well, needless to say, Helene will be a retired tropical cyclone name.
Oh, of course.
From there. Now, let's not forget also the storm surge in the Florida coast, from what I saw, was mind-numbing.
It's, what else can you say? There really aren't any words. We've seen, if you've been watching the national news, you can you can see for yourself as to what has been going on. And you're right, Joe. It's amazing. Here we were concentrating on tidal flooding, storm surges along the Big Bend area, the Florida Gulf Coast, and yet it was really areas, as you just pointed out, hundreds of miles to the north that had the worst of it, the cataclysmic damage. And I'm just so happy that you got through it in fairly good order here. No major problems from what I've been able to see from your standpoint in terms of, I mean, you did get like over 8 inches of rain.
Yeah, I got 8 inches of rain spread out about over say 36 hours,
Yeah.
and yeah, the local rivers here, the one that's right near my house, and a couple of others that I passed through along the way. I mean, they came up pretty high, but uh, no, I've seen them higher. But yeah, here in where I am in North Georgia. Now, again, you go into the northeast corner of the state, and then you go into southwestern North Carolina, and it is, it quickly becomes this horror story. And by the way, just a couple of things. I know a few people on the chat board. Quincy McCoy, you were in the thick of it to some degree, so we're good. It's great to see you on board tonight, and that everything's okay by you. And we haven't seen Johnny Quest, but he's up in northwestern Virginia. I don't know if he was traveling down into northwestern Carolina, into western North Carolina for family issues. I'm not sure, but we haven't seen Johnny on the board in a while. Um, I know there's a few people that don't post that often on the show, but often post on the videos afterwards that are in Western North Carolina, and where they were, they said that everything was, a little rocky, but okay. But I'm just, I see more and more. I see videos of people having, videos of bridges as they're being washed away, roads as they're collapsing. I will tell you just a small thing that's happened, very small thing that's happened here in terms of inconvenience is that the supermarket chain here, one of the big supermarket chains in North Georgia and in the South, is Ingles, and they're based in Western North Carolina. So now their whole computer server systems are down, so they can't process credit cards, and their pharmacies can't fill prescriptions. So I guess it's just a reminder to, among other things, for folks to make sure in terms of any kind of emergency preparedness plan, and in a time where Joe, everybody runs around with credit cards and doesn't carry, very much, if any, cash on them. Might be a good idea to just make sure you've got a little bit of cash safe, stay stored away someplace, so that just in case something happens, and the technology systems aren't functioning, at least you got cash, and you can get groceries and so on. I mean, we're talking, this is a minor thing. But it just happened that it's affecting everybody in town is, you know, because it's the only supermarket in town. So it's sort of
But
like, well, they're not taking credit cards and can't get our prescriptions filled.
everybody should have, and I spoke to this is I guess 15 or 20 years ago. I did a story on News 12 about emergency preparedness, and everybody should have what is called a go bag, which incidentally will contain not a tremendous amount, but a fair amount of cash, so that you have cash at hand in situations just like what you mentioned, where we don't have access to or we can't use credit cards, cash, and a variety of other things. I'm sure that if you go on Google and type in go bag or how to put together a go bag and what needs to go into a go bag, comma emergencies, you'll find what needs to be put in there. Medical supplies, ID, money, and with any luck at all, you'll never have to use that. You'll never have to use your go bag. But in case you do have an emergency, and my goodness, this was an emergency of the first magnitude across much of the mid-Atlantic and southeastern states, especially, you're going to need that go bag, and it's always good to have.
Yeah, no question. So just as a review, I thought I'd just kind of go back and look since we weren't on Friday, and we talked about this big upper upper low that formed in the middle Mississippi Valley. It actually dropped down from the northern plains on the I went back on the GFS a little bit here. So you got this big upper low that came plunging down, and Helene at that time was had just moved into the eastern Gulf of Mexico and was beginning to strengthen. This system up the system to the north really was the big player here to make this um, a rather unique situation. In we had Hurricane Sandy, the same sort of thing happened where we had this deep diving cutoff. The difference is that Sandy was out at east of 70 West in the Atlantic Ocean, and it was pulled north and northwestward and eventually absorbed by the upper low. This one was much further west, but it operated pretty on the same principle. And you can see that as I put this in motion here, that the hurricane heads inland in the Florida Big Bend, and it made a very slight but noticeable jog to the right. And the GFS, actually, of all the models, I think did the best job with picking up. Was the only one that really picked up on this very slight eastward jog. The hurricane tracking models were all way to the left. The European and Icon were close, but the GFS had that extra nudge. But you can see where this goes, and also the fact that the upper low dropping down into Mississippi, it was very vigorous, and it caused the core of this storm to run up like a rocket ship at over 30 miles an hour. So it really slowed down the weakening process, and then it was a perfect setup for western South Carolina, extreme northeast Georgia, western North Carolina, where they got into the southeast winds and the orographic lift that occurs, and the atmosphere. It was like wringing out an absolutely a soaked sponge. You never get all the water out of it, but you sure got a ton of it out, and and that the outcome was horrific rainfall amounts, the likes of which most people have never seen before, and hopefully never see again.
Well, yeah, I know. Yeah, in fact, I remember after Sandy, I spoke with Jeff Tung, who was the science coordinator at the National Weather Service at here in New York at Upton, and he said, "Well, we know that we're going to have another one like this, another storm like Sandy, and hopefully it will be many, many years from now, not just a few years, but a long, long time down the road." And I'm sure that a lot of folks who experienced this devastation that they just went through this past week are hoping that the next one uh, doesn't happen for a long, long time. Although, Joe, as we'll get into as we get through the show here, we are watching another system that unfortunately may be targeting that area down in the southeastern states once again. And we're not talking about months from now, we're talking about maybe sometime within the next week or 10 days.
There are, just to be clear, there are a lot of stark meteorological differences with this next one as opposed to the one we just had, because all you hear usually on in newscasts when there's this mention, they're getting quick mentions about it. Maybe they're spending a little bit of time on it, but it is a bit of a different setup in the upper atmosphere. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you go to the Armageddon solution here with the next weather system, and I think we still have some time to see how models sort things out. But and we're going to get to all of this in short order. I have the surface maps going back from Thursday, but these are 3 hourly intervals. So this was at 2 p.m. Thursday, 5 p.m., 8 p.m., landfall around 11 p.m. on the Florida coast. Okay, so this was at 11 p.m. Thursday evening, 3Z Friday morning. So that's Greenwich Mean Time. Uh, Between 11 p.m. and then at 8 a.m., the the center, at this point a tropical storm, moved well over in 12 hours time, nearly 400 miles. I mean, it was moving at least 30, maybe 32 or 33 miles per hour. And the core went just to the east of me. And this is one of the things I was concerned about, that the core would go just to my west. It actually went about 30 miles or so to my east, and then winds up swinging around northwestward into eastern Tennessee. And of course, ahead of all of this, just to back up a map, if you look at these isobars here in South Carolina and North Carolina, I mean, this is all tropical air on south-southeast winds, mostly southeast winds, and even east winds across North Carolina. So, yeah, you had absolutely a powerhouse of feed of moisture that came up and around all of this, and that upper low was the steering mechanism for it. They, there's these setups where the upper lows get involved are always, almost always problematic. And whenever you see something like what we saw last week, that should always set off some sort of alarm bells for somebody, that something's going to turn out horribly wrong somewhere.
And you're right about the fact that this is different in character. The next potential system is different in character than what we saw from Helene, and yet the news media trying to be titillating, if you
They're
will.
selling, Joe. They're selling.
Watching the ABC Evening News tonight and the news anchor tonight titillating viewers by saying, after showing all the devastation, saying, and another storm may be heading in that direction within the next week. And I just, like, my you could hear the eyes like a couple of marbles rolling back in my head when I heard that. But
there's time to see how this plays out. The new tropical weather outlooks are out, and we have Hurricane Isaac way out in the Atlantic, 43.8 and 34. It's northwest of the Azores, and now has been downgraded to a tropical storm. So it's down to its top winds are 70 miles an hour. So that's gone. Joyce, which is going to weaken and probably get absorbed by a non-tropical system in the next day or so, is at a minimal tropical storm now, 40 miles an hour, and moving northwest at 5. We have a new tropical depression at 13.8 and 32.5, which is west of the Cabo Verde Islands by about maybe 400 miles or so. That's moving west at 8. That's forecast actually to become a major hurricane by the Hurricane Center, but that will be an ocean storm. There is another disturbance behind that coming off the African coast that the Hurricane Center says now that there's a 50% chance that this could develop into a tropical depression later on this week. And then, of course, you have disturbed weather that is showing up in the Western Caribbean and eventually will find its way into the Gulf of Mexico. No development is expected in the next 48 hours. It's zero. But over the next 7 days, there's a 50% chance of a tropical depression or a tropical storm developing in the middle to latter part of this coming week. So I just want to show you this. This is the upper air left over from Helene, which is what we're dealing with now. And because there's no push from Canada, there's no jet stream flow from Canada at this time coming down to move it along. This upper low has been spinning around since Thursday and has kept much of the southeast and Ohio Valley and Tennessee Valley in a kind of gloom and doom type of day. And of course, we've been dealing with this onshore flow in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England that's made it kind of gloomy and doomy this weekend. But it does weaken and open up and move out to the east as we go through Monday and Tuesday. So the upper low goes away, and the flow across the United States, is particularly in the eastern part of the United States, becomes more northwesterly. There's an upper high that's going to build, in the deep south later this week. We don't have a system coming down from the plains plunging southward like the last one. And there's a little bit of troughing there, but it's nothing like what we saw. So that's a big difference. The flow also, Joe, is not all that particularly strong from south to north. In fact, in the central and western Gulf, you can make a case that the upper air steering is actually on the weak side. So I don't know that it's a guarantee yet this where this is going to form and where it's going to wind up. The other thing we should look at too is when we look at the upper dynamics in terms of the wind shear in the Gulf of Mexico for uh, next week. There is going to be light winds in the southern portion of the Gulf of Mexico, but there is also going to be fairly strong shear along the Gulf Coast. So, eventually, this is a different setup. This is a different setup than what we saw with with Helene. So I don't know how this is going to play out, but I wouldn't necessarily go down the road of another major hurricane coming out of this. At least not right now. And to me, the upper air conditions are not being as different as they are. I would suggest that this might be something far. This could turn out to be something far less than what the models may have been advertising just a few days ago. Even the GFS has got a couple of spin ups. It's got one in the southwest Gulf, another one in the northeast Gulf, and it basically takes over Florida, and then they takes it out east northeast from there. I mean, if that's correct, then there'll be no worries from a second hurricane.
The GFS, actually, the 12Z run, took this system in the central or east central Gulf, moved it till it was practically upon the Florida Panhandle area again by late Saturday night, early Sunday of next week. And then all of a sudden, it suddenly retrogrades. It suddenly moves back to the south and then moves northwest and makes a landfall somewhere near New Orleans. So kind of like it's almost like it hesitates. It says, "Oh, I don't want to go here. Well, let's go somewhere else." Boom, boom, and
Well,
like
that's that weak steering
right,
that I showed. Yeah,
right,
it's a different setup.
yeah.
It's a different setup. The setup aloft is far less favorable for major hurricane development. And I'm being kind here. It's probably rather unfavorable. I don't. I just don't want to make a definitive statement 7 days out. You never know how things might change. And there's a bit of disorganization here with the GFS because it actually spins up one low in the southwest Gulf on Thursday, and then a second low in the northwest Caribbean. So you can almost make the case of maybe having two tropical depressions, two weak tropical depressions, and maybe two weak tropical storms. Now, the other thing I would just the other thing I might point out with this is that you got to be a little careful because sometimes these tropical storms, especially, they may not strengthen to hurricanes, but they certainly could be big moisture producers. And that I would say I couldn't rule out the possibility that the southeast gets clobbered by heavy rain. It just won't be with that much wind.
Johnny Quest, we're so happy to see you on the chat board. You know,
Yay!
not a few people were concerned about your welfare, and he says, Joe, since the rain had started about a week ago, he's received over 20 inches of rain, and
Wow.
it's still raining. However, he also says, so far as everything else is concerned, that all is okay for now. So we're happy
Good.
to.
And you are in northwestern Virginia right now. You're not down anywhere else. So let's see what he says in response. All right. So just speaking of the rain, let's just look at the satellite loop. I'm just going to give it a quick refresh here. I mean, look at this. It's just socked in with cloud. If you're way up in upstate, and if you're north of I-90, if you're up in Vermont, New Hampshire, and in most of interior Maine, you actually had a nice day and a decent weekend. But you can see the rotation of that upper low is still there, and a lot of clouds, and even a little bit of rain is occurring as we check the radar. There are some spotty light showers in parts of the Catskills and in northeastern Pennsylvania, also in a few places scattered in northern New Jersey. There's some steadier rain in western Pennsylvania, western Maryland, West Virginia, western Virginia. We've got some flash flood warnings up in south central Virginia. You see the green boxes there on the radar. So some areas here still getting something, but this is a far cry. There's very little of the tropical system left here at this point.
Just the corpse, if you will, of Helene. And good riddance, as Elmer Fudd once said in one of his encounters with Bugs Bunny, good riddance to bad rubbish.
Yes, exactly. Out in the west, we've got some scattered showers in Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and northern Arizona. We've got a few scattered showers up in Montana. Otherwise, most of the western part of the United States is fairly quiet. We check out watches and warnings. We've got flood watches and some flash flood warnings up in western Virginia. Johnny, where you are, you got flood watches up there. Also in the eastern portion of West Virginia. In the west, we've got a few um, wind issues across North Dakota and parts of South Dakota, where we've got some wind advisories. We have, I think that dark blue that's a freeze warning. So with the troughing out there in the west, there's some colder air that's come into the northwestern part of the U.S. away from the coast. And in the southwest, we've got excessive heat again in California, Death Valley, and Las Vegas, and in parts of Arizona. So that doesn't seem to that doesn't seem to go away. And WPC, as far as rainfall is concerned, well, first of all, let's go to SPC. Over the next 3 days, we have no organized severe thunderstorms being forecast. So that's a plus. And what did I do with WPC? Give me a moment here. Let's try this. Usually, here's the 7-day rainfall from WPC. In the Northeast, it's basically a tenth of an inch or less for this coming 7-day period. That takes us to next Sunday night. And it's a little bit more, up to at least a few additional inches in northwestern Virginia, with a half to 3/4 as far south as northernmost North Carolina, north central North Carolina. Also, some heavier rains in southeast Georgia down through central Florida and back out into the Gulf of Mexico, several inches there. But just about everybody west of the Mississippi, no rain as forecast. And Brandon Doherty hit super chat. Thanks, Brandon. Most appreciated. Yeah, I'm looking at this, Joe. Once we get rid of this upper low and what's, as you call it, the corpse of Helene finally moves off the East Coast sometime later Tuesday, it looks like it'll take an area of rain with that. I think tomorrow there's a chance, especially when you go north of New York City, that you'll have maybe some brightening of skies and perhaps some breaks of sun. Then we got to just deal with this low going out to the east, and some rain might get to southern New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania down into Delmarva and eastern Virginia for Tuesday night and Wednesday. And then a little cold front goes by. And then after that, unless there's some odd complication, it does appear that we could actually be nice and dry and mostly seasonal as far as temperatures are concerned, right through the rest of the week and into the weekend and perhaps even into early next week.
The thing that's been so depressing here, Joe, is the fact that we've had the bare minimum amount of sunshine. We went through a 2-week period here with sunshine, dry weather, lovely conditions, and now it seemingly is going in the opposite direction. We had a kind of a cloudy, dreary, and by afternoon yesterday, rainy day. Today we had a misty, drizzly day with lots of cloud cover. Tomorrow should be just cloudy. Not expecting any precipitation, but more wet weather may be on tap for later Tuesday and again later Wednesday with the approach of a cold front. It won't be until probably Thursday into Friday of this week that we'll finally get all of this pushed on out to sea by a cold front and bring back the sunshine and dry and also pleasantly mild weather. Till then, it is, I guess you could say the weather is simply just indifferent, at least here in the immediate New York City tri-state area. You mentioned up across portions of central and northern New England, north of the cloud line. It was a beautiful day today, but not so down here.
Johnny Quest hit super chat. Thank you, Johnny. Appreciate it. I really do. He said the one advantage of being high up is that the valleys are is above the valleys where it's a disaster. A huge number of roads are closed and covered with water. And I imagine it's going to be a while before that water drains. It's just been a very tough 5 days with all of this. It really has. I'm kind of, as I said at the beginning of the show, Joe, I'm kind of numb, through all of it.
Well, it just goes to show you also that weather is not necessarily a laughing matter. And I think I brought this up before that back in the day, back in the 60s and even the 70s, and maybe even part of the 80s, the weather forecaster on the local newscast was thought to be, in a way, the court jester. He was the guy who you would bounce off a few jokes, some lighthearted conversation. You never really got into anything serious. I know that you and I worked at a TV outlet on Long Island where they had one gentleman who, you know, always was smiling, and his degree mostly was in being loquacious and being nice and being funny. And whenever there was something major that occurred on Long Island, flooding and whatever, that's when he was like a
That's
deer in the
that
light.
that's when he ran away and hid.
Yeah, exactly. This is not. I've always said weather is not funny. I've always thought that weather should belong up near the top of the news, which it now is, but at one point it never really was. It kind of like shut it. In fact, I'll tell you, Joe, today on a lot of newscasts, just about all of them, it's, let's say, a half-hour newscast. It's news, weather, sports. It wasn't always like that. It used to be up until about late 70s, early 80s. It was always news, sports, and now near the bottom of the newscast was the weather. But weather, again, is very, very important, especially in certain portions of the country. And this major national story will continue to be a national story for at least another few more days. And it shows you how important weather can be on television, on radio, and whatever.
Okay, Miss Fowlerite is concerned about Baja. So I've been running the loop on the screen. There's this gyre that's going to persist over Central America, and it keeps spitting out disturbances, some in the Caribbean side, some on the Pacific side. And there is one that gets spun out on the Pacific side in about 5 days, and it moves westward and then turns northward and goes into, passes just southeast of the southern tip of Baja on this particular run. But that's 11 days from now. There's nothing, in the meantime, it's high and dry there, other than the occasional shower tonight and tomorrow. But otherwise, it's high and dry, at least for the next 8 or 9 days.
I have a question. The executive producer just handed me a note saying that I am out of focus and blurry. Is everybody seeing me sharp and clear or blurry on their screen right now?
Well, I just put a map overhead, so just to give me a
I
moment, and
just
I'll
looked,
switch it back. You're not as crisp as I think you should be. Let's put it like that.
well, I have no control over the camera. This happens sometimes, by the way. Well, that eclipse that you just saw, yes.
Oh, suddenly you're clear. What'd she do?
Yeah.
Wipe it clean?
No, I just put my hand over it.
Oh,
See what she does?
I know.
Magic, the
She's a
magic of
magician.
Renata.
She's a
All right.
magician.
And Stink Floyd says clear now, blurry a minute ago. So everything is
Okay.
back to normal. Thank you.
You were saying.
Dennis Cassia says, frankly, he looks better blurry. I'll get you for that, Dennis.
You could just blame makeup then for that.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if I got a Briller Jeopardy here somewhere and get back to some sense of normalcy here. Um, just a moment, everybody.
While you're
Oh
waiting,
yeah,
while you're
so
waiting
we've
for
got
that,
I do have it.
All right. Before we get into Briller Jeopardy, a little piece of sad news, especially if you are
Yes.
Long Island based or were in Long Island for a while. Joe and I lost a very good friend at News 12 Long Island. He was actually the very first time I ever filled in at News 12 Long Island back in August of 1988. I filled in for this gentleman, Norm Dvoskin. And Norm, who before he became a TV star on Long Island, worked for Grumman for many, many years. And then he became the weekend meteorologist, a fixture at News 12. Another thing about Norm was his puns. He always used to finish off his weathercast with some funny kind of weather pun. He also wrote two very interesting and funny, humorous books, mainly about puns and weather events. So sadly, Norm passed away. He was 93 years old. I think he retired when, Joe, in 1987 or 1997?
No,
Uh,
he the News 12 article said that he retired
in
in
2007. What, 2017?
well,
He
what?
retired.
You're going in 10-year decades. You can't the next one takes you to 2027, so that won't work.
Yeah,
Let me just pull the article from News 12 says, and I quote, blah 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 blah. He retired in 2016.
2016.
2016. And he was a father of three. He had and a grandfather. And yeah, Norm was a good guy. We used to play when I worked at News 12. Every so often we would get together for tennis, and he'd almost always beat me. And he was very good. He was a very avid tennis player, and also for lunch. And he was always just a very very kind individual. Um, I can't say, there isn't a negative thing that crosses my mind. I know that if there was,
Oh,
I would say it, but he was just a genuine he was a genuine, gracious, good guy. Class act. Um,
he was of the Jewish faith, and I guess you could say he was a Minch. He was
yes.
very, 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 and he gave me a lot of good advice. And when I was filling in or stringing at News 12 Long Island, and again, he opened the door. He had a day off that was due to him, and they weren't able to find anybody. I stepped in and said, I'll be happy to fill in for Mr. Dvoskin. Did that one fill in, and then from there, I ended up doing about 300 more, and that
Yeah.
eventually led to my full time position at News 12 Westchester. So, Norm, wherever you are, you're a great guy, and hope you had a good journey on the way up.
All right. Let's do a little Briller Jeopardy here,
Mensch,
and
Mensch,
it's
not Minch, Mensch. All right.
Mensch. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, so, Joe, average high temperatures in September. We're doing foreign cities. Okay, foreign cities. So we will start with Turkey, Istanbul.
Oh God, I don't even know what that.
Istanbul.
I don't even know what that. I've been to Turkey. Um, I will say in September, average high temperatures in September.
Yes.
All right, 80. I'll say 84.
That's not a bad guess, though. It's a shade too high. Rothmansky gets it at 78. 78. And John Melander got it too, 78. Okay. The next one, Joe, is London, England.
Oh, London. In the summertime, the home of perpetual clouds and spotty showers. What could they possibly get? I don't know, 70?
Also, another good guess. Close. Owen Daniel nails it at 68. 68. And a number of good guesses from everybody else that were very close. Cenopedia, Rich Rothbansky, 67, just missed it. CWTR Shark just missed it in the other direction at 69. And Frank Scalera got it at 68. And Brandon Doherty had 68. Monaco, Joe.
Oh, my.
Monaco. And I mean, you're close with the royal family there.
um, Grace Kelly's father,
Grace.
he cooked up a good dish. Um,
Yes.
Monaco, what do we have here? So, 82.
That's a little too high. A little too high. Steve Lapointe at 77 is in state country, and so is Owen Daniel at 75. But Mike Waterhouse Bonsai gets it at 76. 76 is Monaco. Okay, Moscow. Moscow.
Even though Moscow is I'm presuming, you know, at a high latitude, they're also a continental climate, and I'm sure that they can heat up or warm up quite nicely. I'm gonna go with 80 from Moscow.
Oh, that's way too high. Way too
Really?
high. Yes.
Really?
Lilith 218 gets it. 60. 60.
60?
Yeah,
You're
60,
kidding.
Joe.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have honestly thought would have been high. I mean, there are parts of Siberia in July and August that can sometimes get to near 100.
Yeah, but they
Oh
also
well.
can get down to 50 below in the wintertime.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and the last one tonight is Naples, Italy.
The home or near the home of my grandfather, Mario. Naples. How about 73?
A little low. A little low. Okay, Jason Fox, you're a little high at 83. Stink Floyd, you're a little higher at 84. Carol DeCara, you're extra high at 88. Michael
88?
Azera, Michael Azera is close at 81. And as there's a few of you that are in the upper 70s. Maggie P, you're close at 79. So that leaves us with what, Joe? It
I
leaves
don't.
us with CWTR Shark, who gets it right at 80. 80 for Naples.
Wow.
Yeah, so my father was also from just outside of Naples.
Yes. Okay.
So there you go. Anyway, all right, I think we can wrap it up for the night. And I hope everybody had a great weekend. And for those of you who are in the Carolinas and the hurricane affected areas in Florida, um, I hope you got through okay. And we'll be back tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern time. So everybody have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye
Thank you
bye.
for the 70 and thank you for the 74 likes.
Oh, and also for super chats from Johnny Quest and Brandon Doherty. Nighty night, everybody.
Good night.